How many more failed global summits on climate do we need to have before we understand that we stop having global summits on climate? I was at Columbia University with some of my students the other day, and I asked them this question, and one of my students gamely raised his hands, and he said 7, which I thought was a pretty good answer. I mean, 2 or 3 is probably not enough, but by the time you get to 10, it gets a little silly. 7 seems like enough failed additional global climate summits before we should probably stop. So, look, we are in this environment. It's very clear. And it's a very different world order from the one we had over the past decades. The old world order was led by the United States. When we came out of World War II, we had Bretton Woods on currency, we had the World Bank, we had the IMF, we had the United Nations. They sound global. The World Bank sounds global. The World Series sounds global, right? There is a Canadian team. It's not global. And this is the point, is that all of these institutions were created by the United States with American allies, American values, American priorities, American capital, and that was the order. You could call it a G7 or a G20, but in reality it was a G1+. That order is gone. What replaces it? Why have we lost it? I think that there are 3 reasons, and I'm going to focus on one in particular today. The first is that the United States doesn't want to do as much as they have historically. I don't know, did any of you see the foreign policy debate of the U.S. presidential candidates a week ago? I apologize. You're never getting those 90 minutes back, right? They're just gone. But of course, what they agreed on was that they didn't want to respond to foreign policy questions. What they agreed on was that they wanted to do nation building at home. The average American is less interested in being the global policeman. They're less interested in being the lender of last resort. They are less interested in leading and directing globalization. Second major region is that Europe and Japan, America's major allies, don't want to do this either. They are busy. They are distracted. It's very clear that for the last 3 years, the Europeans have been maximally distracted by crisis. That's not going to change. Japan, we've had now 18 governments in 22 years, modern-day Asian record. It's about to be 19 in 23. They've had the Fukushima crisis. The Japanese aren't going to do it. That's reason number 2. Reason number 3 are all of these new countries. The rise of the rest, or more relevantly, the rise of the different. So if you look back to 1980, and you look at where the world was in 1980, it is very clear, and it's the old order that we all know. The United States is number 1, and going along the top 10 economies, you have all of those G7 countries. Look at Japan, Germany, France, UK, Italy, Canada, and then when you get to 8 to 10, you've got countries that are really close. Mexico, taking advantage of the American economy just across the border, driven completely by the U.S. economy. Trade, remittances, tourism, drugs, it's all U.S. Spain, part of Europe, Argentina, the most Europeanized of the Latin American countries. That's where we were in 1980. Where are we today? Top 10 economies today. Look at the change. Look at how China's number 2. Look at Brazil, look at Russia, look at India. We've got the BRICS. Where's Canada? Gone. Sorry, Canada. Canada's off the list. So it happens, data-driven, Canada's gone. So that's where we are today. But I said this isn't just the rise of the rest. It's the rise of the different. The fact that they are different makes life harder. How are they different? Here's one way. They're poor. If you add the combined per capita incomes of Brazil, Russia, India, and China, you are still lower than the per capita income of the United States of America. The Chinese will be the first to tell you, yes, we're going to become the largest economy in the world, but when we do, we will still be a poor country. Their priorities will be different. They will be much more internally focused. Their levels of political stability are necessarily lower. The volatility that they are impacted by when shocks hit their countries are necessarily greater. The fact that all of these new countries around the table have fundamentally different qualities of life and fundamentally different priorities for their citizens doesn't make them bad, it makes them different. And we have a harder time politically integrating and cooperating with different. It's one of the biggest challenges in the world today. What else?